Okay, so welcome anybody who's watching. This is kind of an informal session that I'm doing for one of our friends, Mady Newfield. But anybody is, I hope other people watching might find this to be useful. What I'm interested in doing is giving an audio editing overview with a program that the two of us love. And we'll talk about typical basic things that you do, some advanced stuff, and the tricks that I've learned over the years. And I think some of these are going to be applicable to whatever editor you happen to be interested in. Now, CoolEdit itself has a few limitations because it was written a long time ago. There's some file formats, well, one file format in particular that it does not handle. And so M4A is the Apple format. But there's a program that you can download called Audio Converter. I'll show that in a second, that handles that very nicely. And I'll show you how simple that is. If you have a bunch of M4A files, such as here, you bring up the Media Human Audio Converter program. You can either drag one dance into it, or you can drag a couple of dances, or any batch processing. On the drop-down menu, you select MP3, and you can make sure that the conversion rate is 128. There are other options, but 128 is our suggested amount. And then we just click convert. And in a very short time, over here in our directory, we have the MP3 files created. So here's MP3 for 3 Russian dances and for 5-figure cha-chak. And any MP3s or any music files that have tags that contain cover art, that also is not handled in CoolEdit. And any tag editor can remove that cover art. You do your edits and then can put that back in. There's some occasional peculiarities that I've seen with different versions of the operating system, but basically they go away after a little while. So that's really the only two limitations that I have found in using this program for a couple of decades, actually. So why I love it is I love the interface. I love that the way things are laid out. They're very intuitive for me. I have provided a lot of keyboard shortcuts so I can quickly do stuff. And because it's no longer available, you might be interested, well, how do you get it? So you can contact me, and should it ever come a time when I'm not don't have a public face, I'll post it on the web somewhere with my license, because it hasn't been sold publicly in its current form for quite a long time. So I think that any licensing obligations that I have are probably expired. So associated with this recording, I'm going to also provide here my personal CoolEdit settings and shortcuts. So I'm going to go over some of these, but there'll be a text file that you can look at that show what my preferred settings are. So I'll do that right now, but before I do that, I want to mention also there's some keyboard shortcuts, and there's a lot of them that I think are kind of mnemonic. So S generates a silence, J is a rejoin, and if you want to transform amplitude, you can normalize it. So I have an L for level. If you want to add reverb, there's a reason that you'd want to do that. If you have a cutoff file. And so I have the V for reverb and a few other things. So in this file, you'll see why we have some mnemonics for that. So
just to ask,
when we do that, the first thing I want to talk about are the settings. So I did that quickly. So under options, so settings under options.
Yep. Okay. Now I'm there.
Okay. So then you have the general tab first, and then the system tab.
Yes.
So there's the save peak cache file. So you'll unclick that.
And I wanted to know what that means.
So it calculates envelopes and peaks in those envelopes for, I think, beat sensing. I'm not certain. But then what happens is after you've finished editing, it leaves a file. It leaves a PK something or other file. I think it was a .pk file.
Okay, thank you. I've been wondering about those .pk files that I've been deleting for many, many years.
There you go. And the reason they do that is obviously it doesn't have to recalculate them if you start up that file again, if you start editing that file. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that I click is delete clipboard files on exit. Okay, so the next tab under colors, I found the colors that they have for the cue markers and the range markers not to be that clear. And so in the setup file, I show how to do that. So you can change color just by clicking that, and then you click the deep red,
Sure.
and then you say okay, and then the same thing with the range markers. And the last thing is under, let me see, under data. So I think the default doesn't have smoothing edit boundaries by crossfades, and we have the 3 milliseconds that I click, and I set that to 3. And then I see no reason not to have the highest quality level when you're doing downsampling and upsampling. So I click pre and post filter, and I set those to 999. So those are the only things that I think are necessary to do on the setup. And then the last thing under options are keyboard shortcuts. And I'll just show this the way that you would do that. So I'm going to find one, edit favorites. Okay, I don't even know what that is, but if we want it to be Alt Shift Control M, and then we hit OK, then that'll get associated with the edit favorites. But there's a bunch of them that I have already set, and that's going to be in the text file that's associated with this. Okay.
So when I want to do the keyboard shortcuts, I basically need to one by one adjust those.
That's right. So up here, the first one that I have, for instance, is shift or generate silence. Okay, so let's say so these are by the way, these are all organized according to the way that they're in the options list. So when we bring up keyboard shortcuts, what do we say? Edit. I forgot what it was. Generate silence. I think that's the first one.
Generate silence.
Okay, so these are in the order that you find along the menu along the top. So it's file close, file save, blah blah blah, and so generate would be under the generate menu. Okay, so generate silence, I have that set to an S. Okay, and generate tone, I have it's just the default is a T. I never use that.
I notice it shows a capital one there. Does it?
No, it is not. It's not capital unless you've clicked
shift. Okay, so even though it shows a capital S, it doesn't matter.
Right, and capital S for me is a different. It silenced the entire region. It silenced the entire area. Oh, presets. I'm sorry. That's another thing I want to do. So we're going to talk about that. So under presets, so let's bring in a file here. It doesn't matter what it is. And let me actually cancel just to have short time. So when we have file save as, so under MP3, there's an options button.
Yeah.
Now, under the options, we can select the different file sample rates. We can, what bits we want to have, how much joint.
Okay. Can you explain?
And most CD rippers come with a basic setting of 256 or 192. I have a long lecture, which I'm not going to spend time on here, but I'll tell you that for anyone who's over 18 or over 12, actually, you start losing your hearing and losing the capability of being able to distinguish subtleties. And in a room where you're not listening in the headphones, 128 is the absolute highest level that you should ever need. I can guarantee that there's no music whatsoever, even classical music, that under room listening conditions, you would not be able to tell the difference between a 192, a 160, and a 128. Once you go lower than 128, this becomes to be noticeably poor in sound. Now, there's a second consideration, and it is if you're going to do an edit and then another edit and another edit, each time you re-encode, you get a little bit of a loss. So you should do all of your editing at 192, say, but then the final one should be at 128, and you should not store anything larger than that, or else you're going to have to buy more hard disks than you really would need to.
Now that's interesting because I store everything, if possible, as WAV and do all the edits on WAV files.
That's a perfect thing to do. The thing that I wanted to talk about were presets. So what you can do is if you have a setting that you like, so for instance, 128 for stereo, then you can click add. I'm not going to do that right now. Well, I should. And then you get a name. So we already have one. So if I do the drop down here, I have my 128 stereo. So this is already set to my 128, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. If we convert to mono, then I have another preset that says my 64 mono. All right. And so it's a real quick way to do this. If you end up bringing in a file that's much higher, I'll show this later. Actually, let's just do this now. So the
where was this menu? I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me bring in Adama.
But the presets menu was.
Yeah, I'm going to show you. Okay, so Adama, I should have done it this way. So when we look here, we show file information. You can see that if we have file information clicked, it prints out what the sample rate is, and the file size is quite large, and because we're doing 256 KB. So I've already opened it back here. We don't have to do that again. Look here, we can see my 128 stereo, and all the settings that I've chosen here are part of this preset. If instead I want to convert this to mono, then I have a preset that says my 64 mono, and again, if you're storing as mono, 64K 1,000 bits per second is the highest that you would ever need. Other presets that I wanted to mention, amplitude. Okay, so under transform amplitude, so amplify. So you can see here that I have this, I'm going to go through the menu slowly, transform amplitude amplify, but you see that I have a keyboard shortcut of A. So if I just type in A, I get the amplification form. Now I have presets here, which is fade in and fade out. So these are just a faster way, because they're at the top of the menu, of the actual same fade in and fade out that they have as by default. But you can, if you want to, you can have a fade in or a fade out go to 120 dB rather than 240. And we would add this preset by clicking the add button, and then we can name this any way we want to. And so we have demo 120, and now that's added to the list. So this is how you add presets. Another preset that I have under the FFT filtering. So I typed F for FFT filtering, and I have something called click detect, which if we have enough time, I'll show you what that is. Okay, so these are ways that you can, for each of these analysis and generative routines, many of them have presets. And so rather than, like for instance, on the reverb, I have some presets that I've added. I always put a little underscore so that they pop to the top of the menu. So all of these I hope to have time to explain to you. So the first thing that I want to talk about, let's go back to the slide here. So typical things that you'd want to do, that you'd want to fix. You'd want to trim silence fairly frequently. CD rippers often add, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, or maybe sometimes 5 seconds of silence at the end of a form, at the end of the file. Sometimes you'll have a size that's way too big because your bit rate is too high, as I mentioned earlier. You'd want to change the tempo. You want to reduce the noise that are at the beginning of a file, because you might have had a digitized cassette or a record. There might be clicks, and we can show you how to do that. You might want to shorten or lengthen a song, and I'll talk about how to join at zero crossings. You might have a song that starts immediately, that needs an intro. I very frequently, and Mady does as well, add intros. You may have a song that you got from somebody that has a very abrupt ending. They cut it off too quickly. So we're going to go through each of these, and I have examples for all of them. Certainly, all of these typical fixes, any of the editors that you'll learn about are easy to do using any of those. And then I'll talk about advanced tricks if we have time. I hope we have time. Okay, so the first thing for trimming. So Chicolato, that's a CD rip. So at the beginning,
makes it different how?
What I'm saying is, if you've just ripped a CD and you have a file, and so this is one of the files that you've cut that you get from the CD ripper. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So it has, so let's, I'm not going to spend too much time giving a tour of how to go around CoolEdit, but I will show a couple of these, so just to show how easy they are. So we're going to look at the beginning here. So I just right click and then draw a range, and that becomes the view. So now when I click in here and I open up an area, I can look down here and I say, this starts after a second. That's way, way, way too long. We don't want to say start the dance and then it starts. So I personally use 0.3 seconds, but you can use whatever you want. And so that's fast enough for the player to respond. Sometimes players that have the sound immediately, sometimes music players don't give you that first couple of milliseconds of sound. So it's important to have a little bit there, but nothing longer than a third of a second is really anything that you want. So that's one thing that you can do. Now we go to the end of the song, the end of the file, and again we look here, and again I'm right-clicking and drawing a range so we can look at this in an expanded way. And so the CD Ripper has added close to something like 4 seconds of silence. We don't need any of that. We'd want to go on to the next dance, or the player has the intervals set in them. So again, we bring up generate silence, and we can set that to be 0.3, or if we want to delete it entirely, we can just sweep that area and then hit the delete key, and now the song ends right after the applause. And as soon as the applause dies away, the file is fixed. So that takes care of this first set of problems, which is that sometimes you've got silence at the beginning, sometimes you've got silence at the end. Okay, next, we talked about size, but if you had a file that had very, very, where the recording was done, it was entirely too faint, then what we would do is we would say, I think transform, yes, okay, it is under transform amplitude, but we're going to normalize. And so by changing the level, the entire waveform is going to be normalized so that the highest point in the waveform, whatever I'm showing right now, is going to become 70% of the maximum. And if we want decibel format, we can use that and say it's minus 3 dB. Okay, most people understand percentage higher than that. We normalize that. So this then becomes higher, and the highest peak is now 70% of the maximum, or minus 3 dB. So that would be the way. I don't have an example here, but that's an excellent thing to show people that if you have a file that has a very, very small waveform throughout, then you can normalize the level to 70 or 80%, 90%. You never want to go above 100% because then you get distortion. Okay, so that answers.
Because I've often done that with Amplify, but then you just have to keep watching to make sure it doesn't go off the scale, right? So this is how you do it without.
Exactly. So transform, amplitude, normalize makes the highest amount. It finds the highest amount, those peak files that we were talking about earlier. Yeah. So then that would be probably this sample right here is the highest one in the entire waveform. Okay, so now we're going to talk about tempo. So for that one, I'm going to bring in a hombo, and let me bring in 2 hombos here. So we have this one and this one. So we'll read both of those in, and they'll be important later on. So that's good. Okay,
this is Windows side by side in CoolEdit.
In the studio, the 4-track studio, you can watch 4 different waveforms here, but that's in the advanced editing. So we're not going to get to that right now.
All right.
All right. So let's suppose that your group is a little older, and this is that's a great tempo for them. They don't want a fast hombo, and that's what the speed that they want. And then you put this one on, and they all go, yeah, that's way too fast. So the next time you want to play this, you want to permanently change this speed, all you need to do is you can select all. So you can say Control A, or you can sweep A, whatever, sweep across. I'm going to do the Control A. And then I type my T, which is, again, the sheet, I've sort of checked what the Okay, so transform time and pitch, stretch. Okay, so transform time and pitch, stretch. So for me, I do a T, and that automatically selects the entire waveform, and we can select a slower tempo. And we wouldn't do it 75%, say, what we might want to have 80%. And just for the purpose of doing this quickly, so we can do the whole thing. So we check a little bit, and we could preview it if we wanted to. We select high precision because with the computers today, you have no reason not to. We have 3 different options. We can resample. We'll talk about that if we have time. There's a pitch shift or time stretch, and we're doing time stretch at this point. So that maintains the pitch and just simply changes the tempo. So we'll do that. We're time expanding. And then in a very short second, we do that. So now we have a more relaxed combo. You know, as
my question is, if you want it to match.
Okay, so that's how you would do a tempo change. So now let's talk about noise reduction. I just wanted to give a quick way to do that, just a quick introduction to making a tempo change. And you just say, well, you know, let's make it 15% faster. Let's make it 10% slower, whatever. Go by, you know, figure it out and say, just start doing a hombo in your living room and say, okay, that's too fast for our group, and slow it down a little bit and slow it down a little bit and so forth and so on. Okay, so we're going to close that off. Okay, so here is one that starts, I sweep the viewing area, and you can see these clicks here. So this is a recording of a record. Okay, so it's actually not so bad, but those of us of a certain age, we've heard a whole lot of these. So the thing that you could do is just zero this out. So I would do in my particular shortcuts, I would do Shift S, and that zeroes out the area. But let's not do that now. So we have a little bit of noise here. Okay, let's take this one. Okay, it's not going to be heard very much over Zoom, but that is record noise. So the way to take care of this is we type in N. So we do analyze, let's see what, so transform noise reduction. There we go. Okay, so that's what my N is doing. So under the transform noise reduction, and I choose noise reduction, and this form pops up. And what you want to do first is for this segment, analyze it. So we say get profile from selection, and it generates the spectrum of the noise that it's listening to. Hit close to, rather than OK, or any of these other options. You could actually save this profile, but we're not, because we're only going to be working with one file at a time. Each of them are going to be a little bit different, so there's no reason to save it because each noise profile for each song is going to be a little bit different. So you click close, and then you'd sweep into the beginning of the music. You don't have to go through the entire thing, because unless there were fairly silent periods somewhere, we're not going to hear the noise except for the beginning and the end. So basically what I do is I just do noise reduction going into the beginning. So I type N, and then I have a choice of how much of the noise I want to remove. Now, why wouldn't you want to remove all of it?
Changes the sound.
It does change the sound. It provides, it adds a little bit of distortion, and it's most noticeable in quieter environments, or if you're doing this with speech. Music, you don't notice it so much, but a good rule of thumb, I would choose something around 75, and that will give a very adequate amount of noise reduction without a significant distortion of the music. So you can preview it. Okay, now we don't hear anything there, and we can say okay. And now we look at the waveform, and this portion of which had noise has got almost nothing. Well, it doesn't have almost nothing. I can type L and say normalize this, and you'll see there's still some noise there. I've magnified it by many, many times. All right, there's a little bit of the song starting here, but here's the noise. But it has been reduced enough that certainly it's not going to be audible in the hall. And then you could do the same thing at the end.
I'm interested that you only do it at the beginning and the end, because I always did this to entire files.
You can. You absolutely can. I think it's a waste of time if you don't have quieter parts in the middle of the song.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, you often have a different noise profile than you do at the beginning. So this bit, here's a little bit. Let's magnify this, and we'll see where the end of the song is. All right, so right about there is where the song ends. So I'm going to leave my cursor there. I'm going to put a little marker here. So we're going to talk about cues here. So I typed F8, and that put a cue there, and that is still a little bit of the music, and that is pretty much nothing. I should have actually done this much. Okay. Now, so we're going to remove that level, that magnification, and we're going to start there, and then we take the noise profile of this. So we just type
How did you remove the magnification? Was that just Control Z?
Undo. Yeah, sorry,
Undo.
Control Z.
Okay.
Control
And that didn't take your cue out.
The cue remains. That we're going to use. So now we're going to get another profile. I don't know, I can't guarantee it's going to look any different, but we're going to do that. It does. So the noise at the beginning of the file is quite a bit different than the noise at the end of the file. So this one again, so we click close, because we're going to hold that profile in memory. And now we're going to just noise reduce the end and say, okay, again, 75%, reducing by 40 dB. These are good. There are other choices here, how many points you have for the FFT, and there are other algorithms.
Any of those?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Can you explain any of those settings and why you would choose what you do?
It's not worth the time.
Okay.
It
will be on the correct defaults?
It will be on the correct default. I have not changed this at all. That's right. Okay. If I found it necessary to change the defaults, I put that into my my settings and keyboard shortcuts file in the text format. So I'm going to hit OK, and now we listen to it, and it very cleanly goes to the end. And if we then magnify it, again, we've got a little bit of noise there. And now you can hear, this is a little muffled, isn't it? And that's because the noise was a crisp hissing sound. So another reason not to do the entire file is that you don't want to muffle the whole file. You won't hear the transition between this muffled sound and the higher, crisper sound that you have in the file that you haven't noise reduced. So when we go here, that's in the fade out anyway, but it has a nice clean fade out, and I think I started the noise reduction around here. We would listen here. I don't think anybody will notice that this little bit here is a little more muffled. Some of the high frequencies are gone because that was part of the noise reduction. But now we have a very clean fade out, as though it was from a CD as opposed to being a cassette or a record. So that's that. That's one example. I'm not going to save this. I'm going to use another example. So we're going to take the Greek line. Here's one. Yeah. Okay. Now this is certainly not a high quality recording, because you can even hear.
Mono file, right?
It's a mono file. Yes. Thank you for noticing that. Thank you for pointing that out. And get recordings from people, or you'll rip CDs, and you actually have a mono file in 2 channels, and you won't know it. So what would we do? We do the same thing. We sweep across the noise area. We make sure that there's no portion of the music in there. And there isn't. So we type N, or we bring up the noise reduction form. We get profile from the selection. We hit close, and then we just sweep into the beginning. Again, we look to see that there's no. Now here's a quiet spot, perhaps. So we might want to do the same thing. We'll do that. Let's do that. But for now, we're just going to do noise reduction at the beginning. bringing up the form, after we have the file in memory, we say OK. And now we have a little bit of noise there, but it's quite a bit lower. Now, if we look at this place here where the waveform gets a little lower. So certainly we could say, let's do noise reduction on this also. Get a little lower level. So there's no hissing there. So that would be something we could do. And the transition between one to the other, so long as the noise is not terribly bad, like half of the level of the music, you won't notice the transition from one to the other, and you're keeping higher fidelity for the high levels of the music. So again, the end is going to be a little different profile, most likely. Let's check that. So let's get the profile and we'll see if there's any difference. It is different. So do the same thing there. Sweep across, type N, bless you, hit OK, and we have now, aha. I had fixed this earlier, and I hadn't thought about doing this as part of the demo. So here we have somebody stopped the recording, or when they recorded the cassette, they pulled the needle off before the final beat, and we need a bum bum. All right, so I don't have this particular example set up, but I'll show something later. All right, so this would have been an excellent one to have, but this sometimes happens when you have a large collection of music. But we're talking about noise reduction, so that's for later. Now clicks.
So basically, if you had that much noise on the recording, you would need to go to every low amplitude area and redo that little segment, unless you redid the whole thing.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Exactly.
And you could compare those. I mean, it might be easier to do the whole thing, although you would sacrifice some of the fidelity. And
that's right.
How much fidelity you're sacrificing. And presumably, I mean, I know that there are some things where I've opted to do noise reduction rather than at 75 at 50, or I've tried, 50 and 75 and 90, and then chosen which one sounded best.
Yeah. And I always do my editing with headphones.
Ah, interesting. But I could just plug headphones into like my computer speakers on the headphone jack.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we heard here some clicks, right?
Yeah.
So these are very familiar part of records. Let me bring up another file. The file even says partially declicked.
Uh-huh.
Here's a poor recording. Again, it's mono, one. So in an environment, it sounds pretty good. But if you really want to get picky, as some of us are like, what I heard here around 15 seconds. Okay. Yep, there it was. So not sure this is going to come over on Zoom very well, but there's a click in here. Right. Now, one of the cool things you can use is the FFT. So let's see. All right, let's see. Transform. I really should have checked to see. Okay, FFT filtering. Okay. So
what is FFT? What does
it stand for? Fast Fourier transform, but that doesn't tell you anything.
Okay.
Basically, it's an analysis of the spectrum.
Okay.
How much energy there is at any particular frequency bin. Okay. And so you can affect, say, a bass boost for these frequencies, or you can do a bass cut. These are presets that are part of the CoolEdit. But what I have generated for myself is click detect. So what I did was I made everything below, 5,000 hertz or 6,000 hertz. I made that minus 15, and everything above it to be quite high. And for all of these, we're going to talk about envelope editing later on. If you want to add a point to any of these, the way CoolEdit works, if you want to add a point, you just click the line, and that adds a point. If you want to get rid of a line, you just pull it to the bottom, and it disappears. Okay, and you can move these lines around, these points around, and we'll be doing much more of that later on. But let's go back.
You created this particular FFT filter.
It's a preset, right? Exactly.
You created this preset by taking the line from some other filter and then saving it?
Yeah. So I started with, say, a treble boost. Treble boost. Okay. So that's kind of close to what we want. So all I did was I removed a couple of these, and I brought the remaining ones low, right? And I made these quite high. So that's how I ended up with the click detect one. Okay.
And so then.
Now, why am I doing this? So now let's watch. So I hit OK. I'm going to make a temporary change to the file just for analysis. We're going to undo this later on. But once I've done this, all those clicks show up like a nail in a board. Mm-hmm. So I can then say, here's a click. So I can put a Q on there. CUE, so I do F8. It puts a red marker on those. And I have one here, put a red marker on there. I can have one here, and so forth and so on. Now I do undo. Here's the original waveform, but now I know where our clicks are.
Oh,
right? So look at that. That's a tiny little thing. Not even visible, but that is an audible click.
Yeah.
And here's another, zooming out. Now let's zoom in here. So that was actually, there's the click right there. I didn't precisely align on it. Okay, so there's several ways. There's several ways
about the cue lines. This is amazing, because trying to keep track of things when you're constantly changing scale is one of the hardest things.
Yeah, there's several ways of removing them. A really stupid simple way is to go from one zero crossing to the next, and you can say zero that.
Yep.
Now that's terrible. Another thing you can do is you can amplify it and say constant amplification and say reduce it. So you end up with that same waveform, but a cooler way to do it is to do an FFT and to say treble reduce. There's a couple things I'm doing here. So when I'm sweeping across an area, I want to analyze from a zero crossing to a zero crossing. So one of my shortcuts, I don't know what it is over here, but one of my shortcuts is Control I, which says go in, Control I for in, to a zero crossing. And what's a zero crossing? It's a spot where the waveform crosses from plus to minus, and on the other side, we're going from minus to plus. Okay. Then we can
for your selection go into the next zero
right.
crossing.
So I just did an arbitrary selection, and who knows where I am on this side, right? Mm-hmm. So now if I do Control I, it finds the next set of zero crossings.
Okay.
And when I do Control D, that extends it outward, and that's very useful for editing all the time. And now the last thing we want to do is treble reduce. And we have a large amount. We're going to move it even further if we want to, because clicks are high frequency events. So when we do that, we get a smooth waveform. So let's look. Here it is before, and here it is after. And so that's a very fine way to get rid of a click. Now, if you've got a whole bunch of them, it's not worth it. It's going to take you hours to go through this. But if you're a perfectionist, this is the way that you remove clicks. Okay? So that was that topic. I
always just cut out the little tiny line.
Right, and you
can. Just tried not to cut out too much of the time, and then listen to make sure you wouldn't hear it.
So you would want to go from zero crossing to zero crossing. So what we do is we select the area that's a click, and we go out, Control D, and then we hit delete, and that spot goes away. And so on the left side and the right side, we're maintaining the transition from minus to positive, okay? So we want to go from here to here, not this zero crossing, because if we delete that, we end up with one of those, and you got to click there. So you don't want to do that. So
you wouldn't want to just take out the little teeny bit.
You want to maintain the waveform. So this would be the minimum you'd want to take out right here. So it's descending here and it's descending here. And we do that, and you now end up with just a little bit, and this is not going to be audible. You cannot tell. This isn't going to throw off anybody's dancing. But if you have a stereo recording, it's more complicated because let's suppose we had a click in here, all right? So let's suppose that this spot here, marker there, is click. So we select this and we say, what is the zero crossing around that? Oh my gosh. That's the part where there's a zero crossing in the left channel and on the right channel. That don't work too well. So, but sometimes you end up with a click only in one channel. In that case, you would then zero this, just that part, and the other sound comes through here. And as ugly as that looks, it's not going to be audible because you've got sound coming out the other channel.
Oh, I see. How did you zero it there?
So we select one channel. This is grayed out.
Yeah.
Now I don't have a click over here, but I can do Control D, and that gives me the zero crossings there. And then I type capital S, which zeroes this out.
Okay.
Generate, I forget what it is, transform silence.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
And now because you've got sound over here and no sound over there,
okay.
Headphones you'll hear it, but this is so short. This is 2 milliseconds.
Yeah.
You're not going to notice it. So that's taking care of clicks. Now let's talk about shortening or lengthening songs. So here's Connie Dance. All right, great dance. And it's all of 55 seconds long. So here's a little sample for those of you at home. Probably the only dance in the folk dance repertoire that's a jaw harp or Jew's harp and bass. But you know, you got to love a culture that puts those instruments together. So it's a great little dance, and the sequence isn't very long. But damn it, you know, by the time the song ends, you want to do more. And I love the end. So we want to preserve that. So what some groups do is they just simply grab it all, copy, and then paste. All right. So it stops. It stops and then restarts. Boy, is that inelegant. We can do better. So the way to do this is you find the phrasing. You find the first spot where the beginning of the phrase occurs. So this part here, the bass is really not doing very much. This is leakage from one channel to the other of the Jew's harp. The bass is not in there. So we're gonna pick it up where the bass comes in. So let's listen to it a little bit. Okay, so that was it. So I'm going to hit F8 each time we have a downbeat. So watch you out there in television.
Your red cue marks?
Yes, yes. So out in television land, you're going to be watching down here on the time sequence, and you'll see my F8s as they appear. Okay, don't know that it looks quite synchronized over Zoom, but now I've got the downbeats. Okay, now the same thing down here. Okay, so these are the downbeats at the end and the downbeats at the beginning. All right, so without using the studio plugin, you can just do copy paste. So here's the beginning. This was one before. So this is where the dance begins its next repetition. So we're going to zoom in, and that was just the reaction time of my pressing the function key. So we're really going to adjust this to the beginning of the beat. So it's a little bit to the left of where I pressed the cue mark. So I'm going to change.
Yellow one? The yellow mark.
Yellow line is my cursor. So I'm doing a left click wherever the mouse is.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to set a range mark. I'm going to set the cue marker here right at the beginning. All right, it's pretty obvious here. That's where this begins. And I'm going to remove this one. Now it's the yellow overwrites the red, but there's really a red one there. So that's the beginning of where we're going to make our copy. Now the end. Channels. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so at this spot, it's hard to hear. Let me play it again. When it gets to this spot, that's the last beat that is in time, and it would be where the next repetition of the figure would start had the song not be ending. So let me say that again, because that's a little complicated. This is the downbeat where the next repetition would start had it not been a retard in the end of the dance. So watch this. Watch this. Listen to this. That's where it would start again. So now we're going to adjust this so it's the beginning of that beat. Now, something that you learn from lots of experience, people actually hear. It's a little bit weird, but I'm gonna draw an envelope here. This is really the downbeat, and it's kind of, even there was a little bit of sound there, people hear this as the beat, and the same thing on the other side. So I'm gonna say that it's very clear here. We would not put the marker at the beginning of this part here, but we'd start it after some sound occurs. Or gets going, as it may be the right way to say that. So now we're going to zoom out and go to the beginning, not the first one, but the second one was the beginning of that song, of the beginning of the figure. Okay, so let's look at the left side. We'll zoom in on the left side. So again, a little bit of sound here, but really this is where the majority of the beat is. Now we're going to go to the other side. Again, I've got keyboard shortcuts for this. And now those are the parts where we're going to replicate. So we're going to zoom out. I'm going to do copy. And then with my cursor, because one of my settings, I should have shown this at the beginning. The edit snapping. So I forgot to say this at the beginning. When you bring the program up, edit snapping, you should snap to cues. Not to the ruler, but to the cues, because we put a cue in here and we want to snap the cursor to there. So even if I'm not quite close, it snaps there. All right, if I'm further away, it goes there. So certainly at this resolution, it's going to snap to the cue. So we go to there, it snaps to the cue. I copy, and I'm going to now go there and paste. Now I'm going to type F8 again and click this as a range. So this now becomes blue markers, because if there's any problem, I want to know where my paste had been. So this highlights it. So if I highlight something else and zoom in on there, I can know where the beginning of my paste was. And on the other side,
the most useful thing you have told me is about cues is how to mark what the hell you did, because I spend so much time looking for things.
And you can bring up the cue list under view, and you can edit these if you want to. These are the ranges, and these are all the cues that we've put in there. These are the different times when I was saying doom, 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 doom. So we can actually edit them and change them as a label. I don't mean to edit them in terms of their timing, but you can change the label. And so that's very useful as well. And you can add and delete if you want to. Okay, so we're looking at the beginning of our edit, and then we're looking at the end. So we're going to go to the end. And so again, that's marked at the end of the range. And so we can look at that. And we say, looks pretty good. So let's listen to each section. So we're going to listen here. This is the beginning. This again is marked. So we're going to listen to here. Back up a little bit more. Now, it's a little bit wrong in terms of the tempo. we're going to talk about adjusting. Have we talked about? Yes, we have talked about adjusting tempo. So if you wanted to, you could speed this section up a little bit, and we're going to talk about how to get that exactly right. But it's not bad for a simple operation of just simply doing copy paste. This is a really, really good way to extend the length of your song, and most people will not notice. Most people won't notice that there was a little bit of a retard, and then it speeds up, and then it gets going. Now the other side of this, what we did is we did the paste, but we pasted it directly to the end. So now we have a song that is almost twice as length, twice as long.
Yep.
I want to move on. Okay, so that's lengthening. I have another example. Yes, Kune. All right. So we're not going to save that. We're going to open up Kune. There it is. And for a lot of people, they love this dance, but it just goes on too long. It's not long. It's only 2.5 minutes. But for some people that have older groups, it's a little long for them. So the way to shorten something is not too hard. What you do is you listen to a section where the beginning of the dance, where the beginning of the figure starts up. So there's a beginning of singing around 105. Okay, that's good. Let's look over here. I happen to know where this is. And there's singing again. So what we can do, so let's remember where that was. So it was about 140. So it's about 144. And let's mark that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen and then hit F8 to put a cue marker when she starts singing. There, okay. So it doesn't have to be exact. We're going to fix it later. Now back here. Okay. So somewhere around in there is where the singing begins. And the quick way to understand what we're going to do is we're going to remove this section. But let's make that perfect, not just make a hack job of it. Okay, so it wasn't so bad. Again, I mentioned to you just when we're talking about Kiskanitans that people feel the beat a little after the waveform begins to increase. But for editing purposes, we want to have a point that's exactly the same. So it could be there, it could be at this spot, it could be at this spot, it could be anywhere, but so long as we are consistent. So just for giggles, let's choose the highest spot. It's hard to know through that little segment that she's beginning to sing, but when you have a larger amount. So let's find a zero crossing somewhere in here, okay? So let's remove the one that we had before. Now we'll go to the other one. And we're going to do the same thing. So let's listen to this. So actually, I was a little late. This is where she begins to sing. Okay, so I'm going to put that should be my temporary marker. Okay, we zoom in. And now we see a little bit of the envelope of her singing. And we'll just choose something or other around there, a zero crossing, sort of a zero crossing near there. Type F8. Now what we're going to do is we're going to compare the envelopes from the beginning of where we're going to compare the beats of where we're beginning the cut and where we're ending the cut. So what I'm going to do is I have keyboard shortcuts, comma and period, which will cycle back and forth between these. And each time I go, it will zoom in a little bit if I want to. So here's what I'm talking about. This is the left edge. This is the right edge. And we're zooming in. Now at this point, go back and forth. Left, right, left. Oh, I just want to go out a little bit. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And what you should look at is where this beat is where this beat is on the corresponding side. So here's the beat, it's about there. On the other side, the beat is there. So they peak fairly close to where the other side was. I hope this is being a little bit clear. Maybe this is a little bit off, but it's not too bad. We can make adjustments. Let's say this one is later, this one is shorter, so we would want this to be a little bit over a little bit. So we go back and forth so that the peaks are approximately the same from the one side to the other. Now when we go in, we zoom in and we look for something like here we're very lucky. This is a zero crossing on both channels, or something close to a zero crossing on both channels. This one is very more ragged, but again, we can find a spot, let's say here, where it's close to zero crossings on both sides. And the amount of adjustment that I made is not enough to change your perception of the beat. So now let's zoom out, and we're going to hit delete. And then I hit F8 to mark the spot where the deletion occurs, and I'm going to listen to just that section. All right? So it looks pretty good. We can zoom in, and we zoom in even more. And there's no jagged parts. So there's a couple jagged parts. That's not too good. We can actually fix that. But let's listen. Let's listen to this. So it's absolutely perfect. You wouldn't hear that cut. There's no way anybody would hear that cut, even in headphone listening. And I mentioned we could fix those jagged cuts, but we don't need to because there's so much activity happening. This is so jagged already that the small amount of discontinuity that we have at the cut is not going to be noticed. So that's how you would shorten a dance. We showed you how to lengthen a dance. The next thing that I want to show.
I had one question there. I mean, this is something that I've done without the ability to go from one side to the other to compare. So I would just, know that I was not doing a great cut to start with and fix it when I was looking at just the one area. But the question I have, when you were looking for the zero crossings, it seemed to me before you had something where you could find zero crossings.
Right. In a stereo recording, sometimes because it's asking for absolute zero, it's going to be far, far away.
So it's better to do it just by eye. That was my question.
Exactly right.
Because it was stereo. Okay. Great.
Exactly right. If you're working with mono, then you will actually. So here's a good thing. Let's talk about how you would know that you have a mono recording. I don't have one here because I've already fixed them. But let me stop. I'll stop my edits. Let's pretend that you ended up with. Now, let's suppose that we're going to convert and we're going to change it. Yes, there we go. So someone has sent you a file, and it's a stereo file, and my gosh, you've got to keep all these bits. No, you don't. Because if you listen to it, maybe you'll notice that the right and left channels are pretty much the same. They're not going to be identical this way because I just duplicated it. But in many mono recordings, if you had something that was recorded from a record and put onto a cassette tape, and then the cassette tape is then digitized, you're going to get a little bit of differences between the left and right channels. But if you type, oh gosh, I forget what filter, I don't know, amplitude. Yes, okay, so under transform amplitude channel mixer. So my keyboard shortcut is an M, so I type an M and that pops up. Then we do something called vocal cut. Now, this is intended to be if you have a stereo recording. Many stereo recordings are set so that the instruments are on the left and right and the singer is in the middle. That's not always the case. Sometimes the singer has reverb on it, and so they're not exactly in the middle, but they reverb something to the left channel or to the right channel. But if you choose vocal cut and say preview, you get silence. Or what will happen sometimes, it will be, let me mimic it a little bit, say 95 here. You hear a very, very small amount of sound, and it'll be distorted. It won't be as clean as this. This is a way of determining that you actually have a mono recording. Under these circumstances, when you save the file, if I do save as, and then options, I convert to mono. And that's where you would do that. So what did I do that? I did it real quickly. So I did file, save as, and then options, and then click convert to mono. Okay, and you can very safely save these as a mono file.
And the reason you can be sure of that is because vocal cut shows you what the, explain that briefly again, what vocal cut is showing you?
Right, what vocal cut is doing, the actual mathematics of what vocal cut is doing. Oh, I don't have stereo here, sorry.
That's okay.
Let me do
I
it
remember
here.
what it looked like.
Yeah, I know, but for the point of our television audience,
Okay.
this math, what it's doing is it's subtracting the left channel from the right channel.
Okay.
That's what all of this does.
In vocal cut particularly.
Oh, that only vocal cut. The rest of these swap channels and no mixing and left, right to mid side and all these other things. This is different math that's done to each channel. But the vocal cut, this, if you work out the mathematics, what it's doing is it's subtracting the left channel from the right channel. Anything that is duplicated between those channels is removed. And the only thing that remains is something that is near, that is what the technical term is panned, P-A-N, panned to the middle. And if you have nothing in the middle, then you've got a mono file.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
Great question. Great question. Okay, so now we've covered trimming, changing the size, changing tempo, noise reduction, getting rid of clicks, shortening and lengthening a song, adding an intro. So one of the first songs that I added an intro to is Dos Patsko. And here we go. We're going to listen to it. And we put it on the player. Up, and we're late because we should already be stepping on that first beat. Well, with live musicians, they give you some introduction. Unfortunately, no great knock against Yves Moreau, but the recording that we got here has no introduction. Now, what many people do, of course, is they let that first several beats go. Nothing wrong with that. But I don't want to waste any music. I want to put an intro in. So the thing that I would recommend doing is you find the end of the third figure, the final figure, I should say third figure. If it's got 7 figures, you find the end of the 7th figure. If it's got 2 figures, you find the end of the second figure. And if you've got a country, if you've got an English country dancer or Scottish or FCD, you find where that's a little harder because the melodies are changing.
You might want to do the end of the first phrase.
Yes, you do the end of the first phrase because that's a lead into the next melody.
Yeah.
And actually, there wouldn't be anything wrong with doing if this portion was melody 1 and this portion was melody 2, you're still going to be fine with having this portion right here, which is the end of melody 1, because people are going to expect to have that repeated. So this now, I happen to know, I can save a little time. We don't have to listen to the whole thing. Where does figure 3 end? It's around here. So I put a little marker there. And that actually was a little too early, I would say. So there's 2 opportunities. So this is the end. Let's prove that it's the end. Okay, there's figure 1 again. So that right here is the beginning of figure 1. So if you wanted how long is this, 5 seconds, then you would choose that one. If you want a intro that's 10 seconds long, that's what I would recommend, you would choose this one. So let's zoom in. Here's our left cue. And again, I said, people hear the beat here, but this is really the beginning of the note. So we want to put the, now we go. Okay, so this is the beginning. Let's check that. Listen again. Beautiful place to start. So now we go to the beginning of the figure 1 when it comes out of figure 3. Oh, so that was where my cursor had been when I was typing F8. So that we're going to get rid of those. This is not the one I want. A couple cues there. Got several cues there. Okay, here's one. So right there is the beginning of figure 1. So we're going to zoom in on each of these and make sure that they're precisely right. Okay, we did that already for this one. Oh, sorry, I don't have the range, that's why. Let's go back to this one again. We'll zoom in on this one. That's fine. And now we're coming on this one. Let's listen here. Now, had I typed here an F8, that would not be good because this is in the middle of the note. So we want to start here. I'll take off that cue. Oh, you have to actually position the cursor on the little triangle. Okay. So now
you do that with a right click, the delete cue.
Yes. So if I've typed F8, and if I type left, it just simply, that's just for moving the cursor. So you have to right click the marker, and that will delete the cue. If you have a range, I've typed F8 and I've now marked a range. Again, I right click either one of them and it deletes the range.
Okay.
So that becomes the cursor marks.
And when you're zooming in, are you doing that with a keyboard shortcut or with the right click and drag?
No. So that's my shortcuts. So for me, let's see, view, zoom, there may not even, oh, sorry, it's one of these things. Okay, so one of these is zoom into left edge, zoom into right edge. So this is zoom into left edge.
And are you hitting those, or do you have a keyboard?
I'm actually, so I'm clicking them to show what you would use on the display here.
Yes.
But my keyboard shortcuts, which don't work, which is not a good way to tell people over Zoom, but this is what I'm doing. So I'm typing my comma and my period. They're neighboring keys, and so I found them to be very good.
Sure.
So now I've swept across there, and because I have snapped the cue set, as I sweep across, it just snaps there. So that's the left. I'm using a left drag. All right. Yeah. So then I do copy, and now we come over here to the beginning, and we're going to paste that right at the beginning. All right, so we can see very clearly where the beginning of the song is, and most of the time that will work well. So we're going to do F8 to mark this again. Just absolutely perfect.
Yep.
Now, sometimes the tempo will be wrong. Sometimes the ambience will be wrong. And I'll show you a little trick, which is sometimes you'll hear a jarring distinction here, maybe because you did the wrong thing, but there's a quick way to fix this. And that is to sweep across here and then do transform. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it's a delay effect. So this is why the keyboard shortcuts are so nice, because you don't have to remember where you are here. But the transform delay effects reverb, my V brings up the reverb menu. And so you can choose almost any of these for such a short amount of sound. So let's say warm room. And now if I type preview, so what it's doing is, of course, it's cycling through this small section. If I had done this, and then type V, and then say preview a warm room, we're only going to hear that little bit. And in fact, that's all we need. So
could you explain to me what reverb is? Because I've never used it. I have done, when I've had to deal with that, I've messed with amplification, make it a little softer, things like that. But
so reverb simply, the simple way to think of it is echo. So what it's doing is it's mathematically simulating what would happen if you recorded something with a close talking mic, so you have none of the room echo present. It sounds very crisp but very dry. The audio engineer's description of this would be a very dry sound. So by putting enough echo that would simulate, say, a warm room or natural reverb or nice presence, tight and close has very little reverb. If you look at these numbers, you'll see the numbers are the numbers of the perception of it being echoey is small, and the attack time is small. The reverb length is smaller than, say, a concert hall. So here, the perception of the echoey is a higher number. The reverb length is much longer. So we're using, say, a warm room, and it doesn't change. It changed the visible waveform. Let's do before and after. So I'm going to undo. So this got larger, but it kind of shifted to the right, actually, because what it's doing is echoing and delaying. Okay, so the peak is delayed a little bit. But what it does, the reason I'm mentioning this is it smears the cut. So that if you have a transition that makes an obvious change in ambience, not a click, but if you hear something and you say, that click is really, that transition is really, it's a very audible transition is all I can say. I can't think of other words right now. But this smears the cut between, the join between them. Now there are other ways of doing this, and the studio plugin will allow us to do that. So now what we've done is we've added an intro to Das Patsko, and we can add an intro to any dance we want. Now the last thing that I had under basics was fixing an abrupt end. Okay, sometimes what we get from somebody, let's see, where's my example? Adama, right, abrupt end, Fatisha Kola. Okay, so let's grab that. Suppose you get a file in this. Okay, all right, the dance is over. Why do you need any more sound? Because it sounds awful. Okay, we need another third of a second in there. So what we do is we position the cursor all the way to the right edge. We zoom in. There's another way of zooming in. Sweep across there. And now we've got no space after it. So we position the cursor to the end. We type S or generate silence, but we're going to generate more than 0.3. That's my default I have at for the beginning of a dance. But for this, we're going to give ourselves a generous amount of silence, and then we'll trim away what we don't need. So I'm going to put in 2 seconds. All right. So we have this. Now it's more obvious that we've got this abrupt end. Let's listen to it. All right. So here's where the reverb comes in. So we sweep an area, and we take this final note, and we're going to echo it as though it's part of a larger room. Now I have some presets in the file that the setups file. I think I have a couple of those, but you don't need to. You could use, I don't know, medium auditorium, say, something like that. You can play around with these. You can always listen to them. Nice. So it's not an abrupt end. The end of the sound just emits into the room. The microphone picks that up, and it's a nice way to end. So medium auditorium is fine. Tight and close is going to be too abrupt. Because that's,
so it doesn't use up the whole space that you selected. It just uses up as much as your setting.
Right. So look at the total reverb length. That's 700 milliseconds. I put on 2000 or 2 seconds. The only thing that would use up the whole space, here, large empty hall, 2000, more than two seconds. Or large occupied hall, that's also 2048. Last row seats, that's pretty long also. And you can change these. I'm sorry?
What happens if you do that?
Last row seats?
If you did, yeah, or large empty hall. Okay.
So you hear the sound all the way to the end. So let's look at this. Let's compare them. All right, now, the problem is this has a delay. See, so you don't want this. So what happens is it takes this sound, delays it a large amount, and then emits it.
I see.
So we don't want that. So there are times when you would, but not now. So let's do reverb again. That's my V for reverb. So that's why like a medium auditorium that has a smaller delay. That doesn't kill the beginning, and it extends the end. Let's look at the difference again. Here's that abrupt end, and here it is with the reverb. So we've added an echo. Now let's listen to the end. Very nice ending. Now I have some presets that are my personal favorites, but many of the presets that you find as part of the in the program are just fine. So you just play around with them, and you listen to preview, and you say, that's pretty good, that's not good, this is good, so forth and so on. So that fixes this last basic thing that I referred to, abrupt ending. Now, I want to show a problem that we ended up with, and in preparing for this little showcase here, Polish polka. Here we go, this one. All right. So this sometimes happens when you're doing recordings off of the web. If you use some of these YouTube converters, you'll sometimes get dropout because the data did not come from YouTube in a steady stream, and you were recording it, and it stopped. I don't know what happened to this particular recording, because I got this music from somebody that was just doing taping, and they had digitized their tapes, but let's listen. Not very worthwhile to dance to. Okay, so first of all, there's some nice noise in there. I'm hearing this. Not that loud, but it's there. Now look at this. The two waveforms look pretty similar. This might be a mono recording. Let's check. So I bring up my channel mixer by typing M, and then listen to vocal cut. Look at that. It's a mono recording. So I'm playing left channel subtracted from right channel. No reason for this.
You were playing it and we were hearing nothing?
Yeah. We actually have, so here we have an example of a stereo file that's really mono. Okay, so how do we handle something like this? So I have a channel mixer. So for this, we're actually now going to move over from typical stuff to advanced tricks. And so for this, we're going to talk about multitrack editing. And so that's the way to introduce this. So for this, I type F12, and that brings up this interface where it can have 4 different channels. There are many audio editors out there where you can have more channels. I find that 3 or 4 is plenty. 2 is sometimes plenty. Bring up post. Okay, so these are session files. And what you have here are the files that are the components that are in this. And some of them can be quite complicated. Some of them are quite simpler. We're going to start with some simple ones for now.
The components that are in your multi-track session.
Yeah, you should use. So that's what that dialogue is. Okay. So this has pre-stored. I stored a session after I worked on this, and I've stored cues that I was using to try to figure out how to fix this. So here's the dropout. So let's go back to this file. If I double click, that goes back to the file, to that spot in the file, and then F12 brings me back to there. So if I mute this channel, So
wait, what you did was you put both, you opened Polish polka, that same file, twice.
Well, no, the session, the multi-track session has this in here multiple times. In fact, it's only in the player once.
How did you open the file twice in the session?
Okay, so here I'm confusing you. So let's open up the session again. Let's close the session. Where's close session? Damn it! Right there.
Shift W right there. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to bring in the session, and it reads in the files that are the components.
So but when if you were starting a new session, you would have to open.
Yes, we're going to do that later.
Okay.
I want to show the end result.
Okay.
So here's why we would be motivated to do this sort of thing.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. So
Thank you.
we have, so I'm going to mute this one, this channel, and we're just going to listen to this. This is the original that we played before. Let's zoom in. So it's starting with the cursor here. All right, well, we don't hear it. Sorry, I lied. Here, I'm going to double click on it. So here's that cursor again. And the instruments are getting going, and then all of a sudden we stop hearing them. All right. So how do we fix this? We have to put in the music that was there, and we're going to hope that somewhere earlier in the file they played something similar enough that we're not going to notice this difference. So what we hear here is the da 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 da. You know, let's do that one more time here. Right. So now we listen in here, and so as a result of long sessions of listening. So there's one. Here's another one. Here's another one. So via the basis of trial and error, we're going to choose the best ones of that. So I noticed what I showed you earlier was double clicking in the multi-channel edit, the studio interface. By double clicking here, I go back to the waveform. All right, and I have it exactly there. So we go back to the multi-channel thing. So now let's look at here. What do we have here? This part here. Where is that? It seems to be here, but it's somewhere over here. So let's double click over here. And what we're picking up is this one. So, right? So it's in fact, here, let's do one more thing. I'm going to take this and go back here and put the F8 on that. And what I'm doing is I'm transferring. I don't want to do that. Stop. So we have.
That was one of my first questions, because since I didn't see you put the file into the multitrack side, does it, if you have marked it with cues and range markers in your simple view, will it transfer them?
Now, you were asking how. Now, in the normal way of working with stuff, we would choose something in here and say, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want. But now let's choose this one. It's the wrong section of the music, but let's highlight it, put the range marker on there. And when I go back to the multi-track form, you'll see that there are blue marks there. I'm not sure you can see that. Let me make this bigger.
I can see it.
Yeah, but now it's a little even easier. Yeah. Now, if I go back to this one, I put a red marker in there, just that particular cursor right there. And let's move the cursor away so that all we're looking for is this red mark here at about a minute and 8 seconds. Okay, so we go over to the other multi-track side, and a minute and 8 seconds in, there it is. All right.
How did you make your multi-track just show 2 instead of 4?
On the right side, I swept. So let's zoom out all the way. So there's 4 tracks.
Yeah.
By everywhere in this interface, by selecting a range, I forget exactly how to say this, but selecting a range, we would then look at those 2. If I looked at here, we would look only at 2 and 3. Okay.
Right. After you select the range, are you hitting some key?
No, I'm just letting go.
Okay.
So here I select a range and then I let go, and it zooms to wherever I had been.
Okay.
All right. So by virtue of trial and error, we're now taking this part. So in here, what we have here is the. So there's the beginning of that riff. Da, 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 da. So going here, highlighting it, it's there. The corresponding one in this portion of the music is elsewhere, far away from this broken portion, but it's the same riff. And by listening to one and then listening to the other and aligning them up, Now, these are envelopes. So one of the things that I have in the things to turn off, I turn off show pan. Now, I mentioned earlier what a pan is, which is to go from the left channel to the right channel. If we show the pan envelopes, we end up with another thing to move here, and it's confusing. We typically don't need that, so I turn that off. That's by default on. So we only have to worry about the envelope. So we're tailing this down and slowly transitioning to the riff that occurs earlier. And if we move this to the wrong spot, well, let me undo that. So here we're going to listen to it. And by doing a crossfade over a large section of time, you end up with a seamless transition. It's much better than the butting one cut against another, which we'd had before without the studio plugin.
A couple of basic questions. What you're trying to do is line your sections up so that they are aligned on a point in the music where it makes sense to line them up. And then your lines that you're adjusting are how much volume each track is contributing to the final output.
Couldn't have said that better.
Okay. And that's what all those lines mean. That's what I wanted to understand.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Now I've moved things around, so I'm going to bring this back in again. So I'm not going to save this. So there we go. Okay. So we're transitioning. So this goes from 100% to 0. This goes from 0 to 100%. And then we come out of it. So this portion is the well, anyway, let's just not belabor this point. But basically, I'm replacing the portion of the music that was gone, and then when we come out of the other side, I find the spot in the music, where it sounds like that. But now, our time is kind of limited here, and I really do want to move on to something that I think will be more instructive. We're going to talk about joins via crossfade. So we talked about that a little bit. So we have we're joining two pieces of music, and the way that we can do that, that it's useful, is say we want to do a blend or a medley. All right. So I have a couple examples of that. So let's say we want to make a hombo medley. All right, and we have those two hombos. The one that was nice and slow, we started this program with. So that's nice and slow. And you've got this other one that's much faster, much zippier. Okay, so we're going to make a blend, or show what one of those blends would be like by using both. So we go to so we brought both of those programs, both of those music songs into CoolEdit. Say insert wave from file, but we have this listed here. It's also supposed to be one of the menu options here, so we can bring that in, and then insert over here. Bring the cursor down here, and we insert the second one. All right, so we can move these on. I have X, which
okay,
splices them, and so we can move these little pieces around as we need to. So
I looked away one moment. It was under insert that your menu.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the way you insert, or if I right click, I get a menu and I can insert. And so
you had them already both open?
That's right, but we don't need to. So okay. let me undo that. Let's close them.
Looking away for a moment.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay. Now let me close them here. So under window, we've got nothing there. So we open up the studio, and now we say insert wave from file, and we can start bringing in the medley, hombo, and then this one, and that'll read in there, and it'll be aligned to where the cursor was. So that's useful sometimes. We could say insert wave from file, and we can bring in the other hombo, so that one there. Okay.
Could you have brought in one that you had been working on that you had already marked a lot of cues into?
Yeah.
And it would have kept the cues? Okay,
yes. So let's all right. right, so let's go here. So we showed that earlier, so I'm going to put a cue here, a cue here, a cue here, a cue here, and now we're going to close the session. Close session. All right. Now the cues are only here on the single track view, right? Now we say insert combo, that one. There's our red marks. Maybe
Great.
hard to see, but there they are. There's a cue there, and they're elsewhere. Now the multi-track.
You didn't have to save the first file in any way. It just kept the cues because it was already open.
It was already open. That's right.
Okay.
Now, it's a little confusing, but you have the additional ability to put cues in here that are separate from the cues up here. So if I put the cursor there, it's hard to see. There's a red mark that's inherent as part of that file. If I type F8, that's a cue that's now in the multi-track view, and that is occasionally useful. Most of the time, I will put cues in the single track, and then I will copy them over. I'll just use the fact that they're there, and just, you know, since it snaps to the cue, right, it kind of stops there. It's fine. All right, so now let's make a blend of these two. That's the Hambo. This is the lengthen Hambo. And the first thing to notice, we're going to start with the lengthen, is that they're different pitches. So that's nyam, and this one starts a whole note lower. Nyam, yam, dum. Okay, so we go to the other one, and it doesn't matter with such a small change which one we change first, but we'll change this one because I've already done it. So that's a note higher. So to change it, we type T, which is this transform something or other stretch, whatever it was, time and pitch and stretch.
Yeah.
Okay, so we type T. Now the other option we're going to do is choose pitch shift. And so under transpose, we have some markings in musical notation. So we're going to choose 2 half steps.
Yeah.
It'll be the right amount. So we're going to do a little bit. Let's just do that much so we don't take a lot of time. And we go 2 half steps. And we choose high precision because we've got a good computer at this point. We use choose appropriate defaults. The only thing we change is pitch shift. And we say OK. And it upsamples it. And then when we play it, and now we go to the other Hambo, and we see that they're the same pitch. Now, sometimes it happens. So that's the first thing we would do. Now, in the interest of time, changing this whole thing to a whole step, 2 steps lower, will take a little bit of time. I've already done that. So we're just going to read that in.
Sure.
All right, and here it is with 2B. Okay, so that's 2 flats. So this reads in much faster than doing the transform, and we're going to kill this one because we don't need it anymore. Okay, so yes, we're going to get rid of it, but we're not going to save that. Okay, so now we have to bring in the other one because normally there we go. Normally, had we done the transform here, it would just change the file name. It would do the transform here, and that would be fine. So now these start with the same pitch. So let's check that. Now we mute that, and we listen to this one. But they're drastically different tempos. So we have to match that as well. So here's how to do the tempo matching. You were asking about this earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap F8 on every downbeat. So let's do this here. Now, okay, so I've done that for that one. We're going to do the same thing for this one. Let's remove these cues because they're going to confuse us because this was just.
And when you're just bouncing between these 2 views, but it's still the same files. It's just the multi-track versus the single view.
Right. So here we can go from window to window, from one Hambo to the other. okay?
Mhm.
Whereas we can go to View, Multitrack View, and that's the F12.
Okay, and then you're just getting back to waveform, edit waveform view.
Exactly right.
Got
Exactly
it.
right.
Okay.
Much harder over Zoom and, you know, the recording of that. So
Yeah.
now let's do the same thing with the Hombo. So I'm going to, it'll be easier to see multiplied up here. So let's take this
Yeah.
one. Okay, so I'm going to hit F8 with every downbeat. Now. Okay.
Cool.
Now, what I have is 8 bars or 8 counts for each of them. And let's look at the multi-track view. We can see very clearly they are quite different. So if we lined up the first one there, this is much slower than that one. So let's slow the Hombo down the same amount so that they match in tempo. So how do we do that? The easiest thing to do is to look at the time that it takes to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 intervals. So we look at the duration there, and that's here, 11.793. So we memorize that. 11.793, 11.793. We go to the other view, the other waveform, and we take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 11.793, 11.793. We don't care what this length is. We type T to bring up the stretch. And we're going to do time stretch 11.93, 11.93. And we say we're going to make this 11.793. All right? So we can do that if we want to. All right? And let's do that just for now. This then becomes slower and quite slow. Let me undo it for a second here and bring up my T again, because it's 76% of the original speed. Now we're going to memorize this. We take that ratio, 7686, and we just copy it. All right. I did an undo, so this is the original faster combo. We now then say choose all and bring up the tempo change. And now, okay, it ends up staying in there. We're going to time shift the entire waveform and make it 3/4 the length. Now, because we're limited in time, we're not going to do that. We're just going to do a little bit of it. I still have the 7686, and we say, okay. This little bit is going to be 3/4 the tempo.
Yeah.
All right. Now we're done for all the prep work. I'm going to do F8 again, and we have the range here. Now we go back to the multi-track view. So we're going to start with the slow one. Okay, and this. So that's where the downbeat is, right there. So that's important. So we mark that. Now we come here, and this is our downbeat. So we're going to match that to this. So what have I done? I'm lining up the downbeat of the original slower one and the downbeat of the original faster one. The tempos will change, will match. And we might want to make a little bit of an adjustment because my tapping wasn't perfect. I see that this lines up in terms of the beat here.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of an adjustment. So now I then smoothly tail down this one and bring this one up. Maybe this isn't going to sound very good because I didn't choose a good spot to do it, but we then can go from one song to the other. Now, in fact, making a change, let me come out of screen share. Making a change of 76% will end up with a very audible distortions. So really what's best is to have them meet in the middle, to change one 12% and to change the other 12%, rather than making 25% of one. And the same thing is often sometimes if I'm making a medley of 3 or 4 pieces, one might be in C, another one in D, and another one is in G, 5 whole steps away. So I find a central point and I make changes in all of them so they all are meeting in the middle.
You know, if I can't figure something out, then I come back and ask and say, wait a minute, what did you use for this particular thing?
But practice is by far the best teacher.
Yeah, no, and that all makes sense. Conceptually, it's completely clear. It's just the, how do I make sure I get things into that in and out of the multi-track view and moved around just the way it needs to be. And I just have to take a project and try it. And then when I have more questions, I know who to come to.
Great.
But thank you so much. This was fantastic, Marie.
Very,
really great.
Very pleased. I want other people to be able to do, most of the things that I do. So, just pass the knowledge along.